Hazrat Muhammad peace be upon him stood at Ghadir Khumm after the farewell pilgrimage with a heart full of concern and a tongue guided by divine duty. He raised his voice so that all who had come to that place could hear him, and he declared what he had been commanded to declare. He spoke of love and responsibility, he spoke of leadership and trust, he spoke of a truth that was meant to be carried forward by those who heard it and by their descendants. The words he spoke that day were brief in their outward form but immense in consequence and depth. They were simple to the ear yet profound to the heart. They named a person and they named a station, they bound a community to a principle, and they set a standard for how believers should understand authority and devotion. The event at Ghadir Khumm is not merely a historical anecdote to be filed away with other past happenings. It is a living call to conscience and a mirror in which all who care about faith, justice and moral clarity may look and ask how they stand in relation to leadership and love. The announcement at Ghadir Khumm centered on the figure of Ali, son of Abi Talib, a cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet, whose excellence and service had been manifest from the earliest days of Islam. From the time he embraced the faith as a youth, he had given his life in the cause of truth, defending the nascent community, sacrificing for its safety and standing firm in moments when others wavered. The Prophet had entrusted him with tasks of trust and responsibility and had praised him in speech and practice, but on that occasion something was affirmed that went beyond praise. It was a declaration that indicated a specific spiritual and communal role in the life of the Muslim community. Aware of the different ways in which people understand authority and leadership, it helps to reflect patiently on what the declaration means and what implications it carries for individual hearts and for communal life. The first thing to note is the deep intertwining of spiritual appointment and moral responsibility. When an authority is named in the realm of faith, it is not only a matter of political jurisdiction or organizational leadership, it is primarily a declaration about guidance and about the person who will carry the torch of spiritual counsel. The station named that day invites those who accept it to seek guidance not from transient worldly measures but from a rooted moral compass that points to justice, compassion and adherence to prophetic teachings. Those who love the Prophet are called to love that which he affirmed and to esteem that which he raised up. It is natural to ask how such a pronouncement should be received by a community that values consultative processes and collective decision-making. Islam encourages consultation and values wisdom gathered through communal deliberation, yet it also recognizes that leadership in matters of faith is sometimes established by prophetic guidance which the community is bound to respect. The Ghadir announcement is best understood as an act that complements consultation by ensuring continuity of spiritual guidance. It does not negate the importance of counsel and community engagement, but instead anchors those practices within a moral horizon that refuses to let expediency or factionalism define the course of the community. The nature of prophetic guidance is inherently oriented toward preserving the ethical core of the message. It seeks to protect the community from losing sight of its foundational commitments to justice, mercy and steadfastness in God. The appointment of a trusted guide is therefore a precautionary measure against drift and division. It is a way of ensuring that the inner light of the teachings remains lit and that the community continues to have a living example to look toward when questions of meaning and direction arise. A second dimension of the event that deserves attention is the emphasis on love and loyalty as ethical imperatives. The Prophet's declaration was not a mere administrative move, it was a call to the hearts of people to recognize and respond to a bond that is spiritual, familial and moral. Love in the prophetic sense is not sentimentalism, it is a force that shapes commitments and actions. It means standing by justice even when it is costly. It means honoring those who embody the virtues of courage, humility and devotion. Ali represented these virtues in abundance. The recognition of his station thus calls believers to reorient their attachments toward what the prophetic message elevates. Love rooted in truth and guided by conscience compels one to prioritize integrity over factional interest and to defend the rights of the oppressed wherever they are found. This is a lesson for every age. The third point is that the declaration invites reflection on what leadership actually looks like. Leadership is not merely occupying a position and issuing decrees, it is being available to instruct, to console, to correct and to enact justice. It is living a life in which words and actions align, where humility accompanies authority and service tempers power. The model presented by Ali in his life and the model alluded to by the Prophet in his pronouncement are of leadership that listens before it speaks, that sacrifices before it commands, and that bears the burdens of the people before asking anything of them. When leaders embody such virtues, the community thrives. They become sources of strength in times of trial and beacons of hope in times of despair. A fourth aspect that arises from the event is the importance of unity grounded in principle. The Muslim community of the Prophet's time was diverse in background backgrounds, temperament and political outlook. The challenge has always been to channel such diversity into a shared pursuit of noble ends rather than into factional rivalry. The declaration at Ghadir was an attempt to do precisely that, to affirm a central coordinate around which the spiritual life of the community could revolve without muting the legitimate plurality of voices that consultation encourages. Yet unity must be sought not for its own sake but in service of higher goods, justice, mercy, knowledge and fear of God. Unity that sacrifices principle for the sake of short-term peace is fragile and liable to collapse. The Ghadir reminder is therefore a plea to seek lasting unity that rests upon shared commitments to truth and right conduct. A fifth reflection concerns the human tendency toward forgetfulness and the role of reminders. Prophets provide guidance and give signs, but human beings often forget or become distracted by worldly affairs. Time can erode the immediacy of even the most solemn pronouncements. That is why reminders are necessary. In the history of the Muslim community, scholars and pious people have turned to the Ghadir incident as a touchstone to recall the prophetic emphasis on steadfastness and on the continuity of guidance. Remembrance must be more than ritual memory, it must be active recollection that translates into living by the moral principles enjoined by the Prophet and exemplified by Ali. The sixth point invites us to look at the spiritual dimensions of authority. The appointment at Ghadir is not simply an announcement about who will manage affairs, it is a spiritual sign that points toward the need for inner orientation and moral discernment. The person named represents a path of spiritual formation in which humility, knowledge and courage are cultivated. Those who follow such a path are invited to purify their intentions, to seek God with sincerity and to pursue knowledge both of the external world and of the inner self. True leadership is inseparable from the formation of character. It raises the question for each believer: is our concern limited to external appearances and temporary wins, or are we animated by a deeper longing for moral excellence and closeness to the divine? The seventh reflection touches on the responsibility of communities and individuals alike to engage with their history in a manner that fosters learning rather than grievance. Historical memory can be a source of pride or a burden of unresolved conflict. It is important to approach events like Ghadir with an attitude of seeking lessons rather than scoring points. Believers should use history to cultivate empathy, humility, and a richer understanding of how to live together in justice. The eighth consideration is about the prophetic example of education and exemplarity. The Prophet named Ali not only because of lineage or personal affinity but because Ali embodied qualities that the community needed to preserve and emulate. The naming of exemplars is a pedagogical act. It teaches by setting forth role models whose lives can be studied and followed. This pedagogical dimension invites scholars, teachers, and parents to present models of character in ways that inspire young minds to pursue virtue rather than narrow ambition. The ninth reflection asks how the message can be translated into daily practice. The announcement at Ghadir calls for concrete actions beyond words. It compels believers to cultivate justice in their homes, workplaces, and public life. It calls them to defend the weak, to speak truth to power, and to serve those in need. The principles embodied in the declaration are not abstractions, they are exhortations to build societies where dignity is respected and where compassion guides policy. The 10th aspect urges humility in theological inquiry. Theological differences exist and they will continue to exist. The proper attitude in such inquiry is humility and charity toward those who disagree, as well as rigorous pursuit of truth. It is possible to hold fast to convictions while treating others who hold different views with respect. This balance preserves the integrity of belief while fostering the social harmony that allows communities to flourish. The 11th point invites reflection on the role of scholars and spiritual guides. Scholars have a burden to interpret, to teach, and to model the ethical core of religion. They are called to prioritize moral clarity over intellectual showmanship and to guide their communities toward reconciliation and understanding where possible. The Ghadir event is a resource for scholars who seek to ground their teaching in the prophetic emphasis on justice and service. The 12th reflection concerns the patience required to uphold moral truths. The path of commitment to principle is seldom easy. There are temptations to compromise for the sake of comfort or popularity, yet history rewards those who persevere in truth even when it is costly. The example of Ali and the affirmation he received at Ghadir provides strength to those who face hardship for the sake of conscience, reminding them that steadfastness has been honored and that courage is the companion of integrity. The 13th theme is the universality of moral values. The principles affirmed at Ghadir transcend narrow boundaries of tribe, language, or nationality. They speak to universal human concerns such as the protection of the vulnerable, the pursuit of justice, and the cultivation of wisdom. These values can be points of commonality among diverse people and can inspire collective action for the common good. The 14th reflection is on the spiritual dangers of pride and the antidote of humility. Leadership must be constantly checked by humility, for power without humility corrodes and becomes a Force for oppression. The prophetic model shows that greatness in the sight of God consists in servanthood rather than domination. Those who occupy positions of power are therefore called to embody humility as a corrective and to remember that leadership is a trust, not a trophy. The 15th consideration addresses the importance of moral courage in confronting injustice. The announcement at Ghadir calls believers to stand against wrongdoing even when it is perpetrated by those close to them or when it promises personal cost. Standing for justice sometimes requires speaking hard truths and challenging popular but unjust opinions. The prophetic tradition shows that moral courage is an essential complement to spiritual insight. The 16th point explores the relationship between spiritual authority and community welfare. The appointment affirmed at Ghadir was intended to secure the spiritual welfare of the community so that social and political arrangements would not deviate from moral foundations. A healthy community thus ensures that leadership is informed by ethical concern and that governance serves the dignity of its members. The 17th reflection turns to the personal dimension of devotion. The event invites each believer to examine personal loyalties. Are attachments rooted in principles of justice and truth or merely in personal preference and transient interests? True devotion is shaped by discernment and by an aspiration to embody the virtues we admire in others. The 18th consideration is about the role of concord and respectful disagreement within the community. Differences of opinion will occur and need not lead to rancor. When disagreements arise, they must be handled with civility, love, and a commitment to truth-seeking. This approach honors both the diversity of thought and the unity of moral purpose. The 19th theme concerns remembrance and ritual. The preservation of the memory of important events is a part of spiritual life, but ritual remembrance must be accompanied by moral action. The commemoration of Ghadir is meaningful insofar as it motivates people to live according to the principles that the Prophet highlighted. The 20th reflection returns to the core idea of trust. Trust is at the heart of leadership and of communal life. The Prophet entrusted a responsibility to one who had earned trust through character and sacrifice. Trust must be reciprocated by those who accept it with loyalty, tempered by wisdom, and by those who witness it with respect for its moral grounding. The 21st point is about education and transmission of values. The Ghadir event emphasizes the need to teach successive generations about the moral foundations of the community in ways that are accessible, inspiring, and grounded in action. Education that fosters critical thinking and moral sensitivity equips future leaders to serve with compassion and competence. The 22nd consideration addresses the healing of divisions. The memory of historic disagreements need not be a source of perpetual estrangement if approached with humility and a genuine desire for reconciliation. The memory of events like Ghadir can be a springboard for dialogue and mutual understanding rather than a wedge between people. The 23rd reflection is on the dignity of the individual. The Prophet's affirmation of a trusted guide is ultimately about preserving the dignity of persons. It is about ensuring that human beings are treated with fairness, that injustice is confronted, and that compassion guides communal policies. The 24th point underscores the interplay between knowledge and action. Knowledge without action becomes sterile, and action without knowledge can be misguided. The Ghadir reminder urges believers to couple learning with righteous deeds to ensure that knowledge is employed for the welfare of others. The 25th reflection highlights the timelessness of moral commitments. The pronouncement at Ghadir is not restricted to a single time or place. It speaks to perennial concerns that will continue to challenge humanity. The values it enjoins survive changing circumstances and remain relevant as ethical beacons. The 26th point is about exemplifying mercy. Mercy is fundamental to prophetic teaching, and the affirmation at Ghadir points toward leadership that practices mercy in dealing with the faults and frailties of others. Mercy does not negate justice but tempers it with compassion, making the pursuit of right balanced and humane. The 27th reflection invites gratitude. Gratitude to God for guides who embody virtue as a natural response. Gratitude should be expressed through emulation, support for justice, and service to humanity. The 28th consideration asks believers to be agents of constructive change. The Ghadir impetus is not merely to honor an individual but to inspire a movement of moral repair and social upliftment. Those who take its lessons seriously work to reform injustices, alleviate suffering, and foster environments where truth and mercy can flourish. The 29th reflection is about the courage to reform oneself. The greatest reforms begin within. The prophetic affirmation challenges individuals to refine their character, to uproot selfishness, and to cultivate generosity of spirit. Personal reform accumulates into communal transformation. The 30th and final reflection is an invitation to live with sacred purpose. The event at Ghadir Khumm offers a moment of clarity about what matters in human life. It reminds us that leadership must serve higher ends, that love must be anchored in truth, that unity is meaningful only only when grounded in justice, and that our final account will be about how we treated others and how faithfully we pursued the moral good. Those who respond to this call will find that their lives acquire coherence and dignity even in the midst of trials. For those who hear these words today, let them be a gentle but firm urging to align deeds with the prophetic vision, to cherish leaders who embody virtue, to serve the needy, to speak truth to power, and to be patient in the pursuit of justice. May remembrance of that day inspire humility, courage, and a deeper commitment to the values that ennoble human life and draw the heart nearer to the divine.